The sun hung low in the Southern California sky, an orange orb sinking into the jagged silhouette of the mountains. Heat waves rippled off the asphalt as Emma's car sped along the two-lane highway, dust plumes rising in her wake. She glanced at her phone. No signal. It was just her and the desert, stretching endlessly in every direction. She didn't mind. In fact, she welcomed it. This was supposed to be an escape, a chance to leave behind the noise and chaos of Los Angeles, to clear her head and reset. But as the miles wore on and the sun dipped lower, a shiver of unease ran through her. She hadn't seen another car in at least an hour, and the gas gauge was sinking dangerously close to empty. Emma's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. I should have filled up back in Victorville, she muttered, feeling foolish. The next town wasn't for another 30 miles, and she had no idea if her old sedan could make it. When the engine sputtered, she knew she was in trouble. A cough, a wheeze, and the car coasted to a stop on the dusty shoulder of the road. She turned the key. Nothing. Just the dry, empty click of a dead engine. Emma exhaled slowly, trying to keep the panic at bay. The sun was nearly gone now, the sky tinged with pink and purple hues. Shadows stretched long and thin across the desert floor. She looked around. Nothing but sand, scrub brush, and distant rock formations. Then she saw it. A flickering neon sign off to the right, barely visible through the haze. Desert View Motel. The letters blinked inconsistently, some half burned out. She almost laughed at the cliche of it, but relief overrode the absurdity. At least she wouldn't be spending the night in the car. Grabbing her bag, she locked the door and started walking. The motel sat about half a mile from the road, a low, sprawling building surrounded by an empty gravel lot. It looked ancient, the paint peeling and faded, a few broken shutters hanging at odd angles. As she approached, the air grew cooler. A shudder ran through her, though she told herself it was just the desert evening chill. Check-in. A cracked bell jingled as Emma pushed the door open. The lobby smelled of stale air and dust. A faded armchair sat in the corner beneath a framed painting in the desert, bleached from years of sun exposure. Behind the counter stood an old man with hollow eyes, his skin weathered like ancient parchment. He wore a threadbare cardigan and didn't smile. Need a room, Emma said, trying to sound confident. Car broke down a mile up the road. The man's eyes lingered on her for a moment too long. We get that a lot out here, he rasped. Desert'll do that to you. She forced a polite laugh. Yeah, guess so. He handed her a key attached to a heavy brass fob. Room 6, end of the row. Emma's fingers brushed his as she took the key. His skin felt ice cold. His nails yellowed and cracked. She pulled back quickly. Thanks. No phones in the rooms, he said, his voice a gravelly echo. But there's a payphone outside near the ice machine. She nodded, already inching towards the door. Got it. Oh, and miss? Emma paused, her hand on the doorknob. Lock your door tight tonight, he said, his expression unreadable. Desert gets restless. A chill crept up her spine. Sure, she managed before escaping into the twilight. Room 6. Room 6 was worse than she expected. The air inside was stale, tinged with mildew. Faded floral wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the bedspread looked like it hadn't been washed in decades. A cracked mirror hung above the tiny dresser, its glass warped and cloudy. Emma's first instinct was to turn around and leave, but the darkness was settling in fast, and the thought of wandering the desert highway at night made her stomach knot. She was stuck here, just for one night. She locked the door, sliding the rusted chain across for good measure. The window rattled slightly in the breeze, its screen torn and flapping. She closed the curtains, but they barely reached the sill, leaving a sliver of darkness visible. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Emma took out her phone. Still no signal. She sighed and decided to try the payphone. At least she could call for a tow in the morning. Outside, the wind howled softly, whispering through the desert brush. She reached the payphone, its receiver coated in dust, the metal rusted. She dialed the roadside assistant number from memory, pressing the cold buttons firmly. The line crackled, a faint hiss, then a voice distant and distorted. Hello, Emma said, relief flooding her. I'm stranded near. The voice cut her off, speaking rapidly, urgently, but she couldn't make out the words. It sounded like a man, his tone frantic. I can't understand you, she said, pressing the receiver harder to her ear. The words grew louder, more intense, echoing through the receiver like a garbled radio transmission. Then, just as suddenly, the line went dead. Emma slammed the receiver down, her heart pounding. She backed away from the phone, her eyes darting around the empty lot. No one was there. Nightfall. Back in her room, Emma paced restlessly. She tried the ancient television, but it only produced static. The wind outside had picked up, rattling the window harder. She pulled the blankets up, though they were thin and scratchy. She closed her eyes, but the echo of that voice on the phone haunted her, a whisper she couldn't shake. A loud creak jolted her awake. Her eyes flew open, heart racing. She listened, straining against the silence. There it was again, a faint creak, like someone stepping outside her door. She held her breath, muscles tense. A shadow flickered across the gap beneath the door. Her blood ran cold. Someone was out there. She heard a faint rhythmic tapping, like fingers brushing against the wood. Then a low whisper, muffled but urgent, right outside her room. Emma. Her name, spoken in that same garbled voice from the phone. She clamped her hand over her mouth, stifling a gasp. Her mind raced. How did they know her name? Who was out there? The whisper grew louder, more insistent. The doorknob rattled. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the nightstand, her eyes locked on the window. It was a narrow gap, but if she could get it open, she could climb out. She fumbled with the latch, heart hammering. The whisper stopped. Silence. Then a loud bang, like something heavy being thrown against the door. The chain lock strained. The wood creaked under the pressure. Emma yanked the window open, adrenaline flooding her system. She squeezed through the gap, scraping her shoulder, and dropped to the gravel below. Her knees buckled, but she forced herself to run. She didn't look back. The desert was vast and empty, but she ran toward the highway, lungs burning, legs aching. Behind her, the motel loomed dark and silent, the flickering neon sign casting eerie shadows across the sand. She heard it again, faint but unmistakable, her name echoing through the night. She didn't stop running until she reached the road, waving her arms frantically at the headlights of an approaching car. Aftermath. 2 days later, Emma sat in her apartment, curtains drawn tight. She hadn't slept. Her car was towed and fixed, but she couldn't stop thinking about that motel, that voice. She looked it up online, trying to find some explanation, but found nothing. No Desert View Motel on that stretch of the highway. It was as if the place never existed. She thought about the old man, his cold fingers, his warning, about the whisper that had known her name. She would never go back. She would never look back. But every time the wind howled outside her window, she heard it, a faint, urgent whisper, just beyond the glass. Thanks for joining us on the open road, where anything can happen and there's always another adventure right around the corner. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the open road.